Gene Chizik. You see him on the SEC Network, national championship winning coach, with us here on Ruskin and Zach. And, Coach, it's good to talk to you again. And we got a lot of defense to talk about when it comes to Razorback football these days. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on, and you're exactly right. I know there's a lot of excitement in Fayetteville with what's going on right now.
So just from your perch, what are a couple of things, if you could boil it down, that just stand out about what they have done in these games so far this year?
Well, it's been fun to watch, guys. I mean, it's been a tremendous turnaround. You know, and of course, people are going to always talk about the defense because how can you ignore what Barry Odom's done? But really, it's a total team complementary game win. You know, when you look up and see them beat a team like Ole Miss, it's offense, it's defense, it's special teams. And look, it just looks like a completely different team than you saw last year. So, look, credit to Sam Pittman. He brought in the right coaches. The kids love playing for him. They're excited to play football again. And he's got these guys playing exactly like he had his O-line playing for all those years. They love it. They're getting down and dirty. They're having fun. And guess what, guys? They're winning games as well.
One of the argument or the discussion is how much of what Barry Odom is doing is scheme versus how much is talent. Because, I mean, you've had great players under your tutelage, and it makes your job a lot easier. But Barry Odom's dealing with guys that, quite honestly, aren't, top-notch NFL prospects. And this scheme and what he did to Mike Leach's offense, he's clearly broken Mike Leach. Because Mike Leach hadn't scored since the Arkansas game. And then last week he shuts down a Lane Kiffin offense that went down and lit up Alabama. How much is scheme? How much of it is personnel?
Well, a lot of it's scheme, guys, and I'll be honest with you. I know what's great for the viewers out there who don't really know a lot about Arkansas because they follow the other 13 teams in the league. This is a fun team to watch because you're looking at a bunch of guys on defense and nobody knows their name. I mean, who knew Grant Morgan before last week? The things that he's done with young secondary guys. I mean, Hudson Clark with 3 picks. I look at Jalen Catalon. I look at this guy. He is going to be something else as a safety in this defense as time goes on. So I think you have to give – I don't think you can minimize the scheme. I don't think you can minimize what Barry Odom has been able to do. And look, I've looked at it very closely. And the thing that stands out that's the most impressive is that defense is a reactionary game. And if guys have analysis paralysis, which means they're trying to analyze too much, they're trying to think too much, then you get paralyzed. None of that has happened. Barry Odom has cornered the market on simplicity and letting these guys play fast. Now, look, the scheme is not simplistic necessarily from an offensive standpoint because he does a great job disguising, but he's made it simple to the defense. And that is the genius in defense, right? The offense can't know where you're going to be, and defensively, you, without a question, know where you're going to be, so you can read, diagnose, and go hit the ball. These guys are playing fast. They're tackling well in open space, and frankly, they're playing violent defensive football, which is exactly what you want from the defense perspective.
We're talking with Gene Chizik from the SEC Network here on Ruskin and Zach. Yeah, we've talked about this week, Coach, about how, a lot of coaches can come up with the plan. But the difference here now is Odom and the assistants on the defensive side, they're able to communicate the plan. The players get the plan, and then they go out and, as you've talked about, have executed the plan. That's not always the case. A lot of guys can come up with great plans, but that communication part is sometimes where it seems like, to me, coaches can fall down on the job a little bit there.
Yeah, 100%, guys. And let's be honest. I mean, take the 2 weeks of Ole Miss offense, and let's contrast those, okay? The week before, you're looking at an Alabama defense where the lion's share of those guys will be playing on Sunday, and most of them for a long time. Conversely, look at Arkansas. A lot of these guys won't be playing on Sunday. They're good college football players, and look at the difference in scheme. Schematically, Nick Saban's as good as there is in the history of the game in terms of defensive game plan, but it doesn't matter how good you are. It matters how good they are executing it. And that is the part that's genius for me to look at what Barry has done, not from just a schematic standpoint of let's make it simple for our guys and let's let these guys play fast because they know where they are, they know what they're doing, and they can execute. But he also knows where to place his defensive pieces, right? This is a chess game. So you look what you have on defense. Maybe Barry wanted to be more 4 downs, but he's got to go to more 3 downs because it's conducive to what he has on the defensive line. So he's done a great job of placing players in the spots that they need to be successful. But again, these are all the decisions that defensive coordinators have to make that go along with executing defenses. Guys in the right spots, teaching them well enough to know exactly who needs to be where, and letting them play fast and execute. And as we've said, it's been a thing of beauty to watch for me personally as a defensive guy.
Hey, Coach, last Saturday, it was clear that they had Matt Corral completely confused. And it seemed to me that basically they were daring Mississippi to run the ball, and they were using pressure points off the corners. Joe Fouché, Greg Brooks, Catalan, and Miles Mason were coming off the corners and had Matt Corral completely confused. If you could, in just really simple layman's terms, explain what the confusion in the RPO system that Lane Kiffin runs, what that does to Matt Corral, and how it led to 6 interceptions.
Well, the first problem for offense is the way that Barry has it structured is you never know when, if, and where a fourth rusher is coming from, okay? So he's going to line down with 3 downs, which means usually there's going to be a guy right over the top of the center, and there's going to be 2 guys that are either head up to inside of the defense or of the offensive tackles. And then from there, you have a lot of possibilities, and that's the brilliance in part of what Barry's doing with the 3 downs. You never know when the fourth guy's coming. And here's the thing. When the fourth guy comes, or sometimes, and he's very judicious if he brings 5, but what he's doing is he's still playing a lot of zone coverage. Well, you do that with a guy like Matt Corral who has the ability to beat you with his feet, okay, because now you have all eyes on the quarterback, and he's playing a lot of what we call, from a defensive perspective, vision coverage. There's 2 types of coverage. Man coverage, where you have a man. The problem with that is when that man runs down the field, your back is to the football. You don't know what the quarterback's doing. The other option is vision coverage, which Barry is playing a lot of right now, where you have all eyes on the quarterback. If he breaks the pocket or anything happens up there where a run is broken, has broken the line of scrimmage, you have all eyes on that so that they can now converge on the ball and hit it before it gets a lot of yards, from the line of scrimmage. So he does a really good job in layman terms. Where's the fourth rusher coming from? Is there a fourth rusher indeed coming at all? And also playing a great dose of vision coverage behind it.
We're talking with Gene Chizik here, talking Razorback football here on Ruskin and Zach. Just the way Pittman is not only is cool with all the attention Barry Odom gets, but he seems to really enjoy the fact that he's getting all this attention. Some head coaches would be kind of put off by that, but Sam Pittman is just a different guy.
Well, I think one of the things that I've always really appreciated about Sam, and not knowing him great, but knowing him well enough, but certainly knowing a lot of individuals that are close to him, I think one of the traits that's really going to give him and get him ahead of the curve in terms of success being a head coach is humility. And, I think he's very humbled to have been named the head coach at Arkansas. I don't think anybody out there saw it coming. I don't think there's any question in his mind. He has full confidence he can get it done. And part of that job, guys, as you know, being the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, is the decisions you make for the people that work underneath you. And, he's one of these guys who has a lot of humility. He wants to see his assistants have success, just like he appreciated it when he got notoriety when he was an offensive line coach. He got notoriety for the way he recruited. He got notoriety for the way his offensive line played. And so I think he appreciates that, and he's not so far removed from that he understands, that all these guys aspire one day to be, and have what he has. I think the key for any CEO of any company or any team is the standard is to hire guys that are as smart or smarter than you are. And, that's the genius part of being a head coach. And I think he's done a great job. And not just Barry Odom and not just Kendall Browse, but all those guys, Scott Fountain, a lot of those different guys, they're all good coaches. But as long as Sam keeps that level of humility that I think he possesses without a question, that's what makes him so likable. I think the kids will love him. They'll play hard for him. He'll be able to recruit, and his coaches will do anything they can to work for him as well.
Coach, I think those of us that are outside the football offices assume that the Barry Odom, Kendall Briles, Sam Pittman triangle is really sort of an exchange of ideas. And you've been in this situation where you've got your OC working for you, your DC. How much of those conversations, or how much can Sam Pittman lean on Barry Odom's experience as a head coach, or Kendall Briles' experience as an OC at Florida State, to sort of craft not only the message but the direction of his program?
Well, obviously, none of us are sitting behind the scenes on that, but it would be shocked me if Sam wasn't the kind of individual who sat around that table with, he's got his 10 assistants and then about another 10 guys in the room. So you're looking at 20 to 25 guys in the meeting room. And it would be shocking to me if he didn't open up a lot of things for discussion to find out what the best answer is, and then have the humility and the confidence in himself to go ahead and do what, he thinks is best. I think guys that lead the best are the guys that don't have to come up with the ideas. I think when you do that, you really limit yourself on your scope and what you can do. I know for me, I hung my hat a lot on what my guys that worked with me thought were the right things. They have a lot of a heartbeat of the team, just like I did, and I respected their opinions. And I would be shocked if Sam's not doing the same thing behind the scenes.
Gene Chizik's our guest here on Ruskin and Zach. So spinning ahead, Arkansas's off this week, but up next they go to Kyle Field to play A&M. And one of the things we've kind of kicked around here, Coach, is if you're Jimbo Fisher, if you're that offense, what defense do you prepare for with Arkansas? Because they've had kind of different variations that they've shown in all of these games. It hasn't been the same game plan every single week.
No, it hasn't been the same game plan, but I can assure you within the structure of what Barry Odom is doing, the game plans, even though they look different to the offense and actually make the offense prepare differently, he's tied all these schemes together where week by week it's not a new learning environment for the players, and that's the beauty of it. It's obvious to me that he's got a lot of flexibility in the defense the way he calls it, but for a defensive guy to always be able to give the offense a different look, but be able to walk into the meeting rooms with your defense and say, guys, here's what we're playing, but it's just like. Those are the two words that resonate with players. Hey, guys, it's just like. So it looks like this, but it's just like. And I think there's probably a lot of just like going on, because when you can do that with the players, it gives you major flexibility without changing the mentality and the scheme in their minds, and still allows them to play fast. So Jimbo's got his work cut out. It's definitely different looks, but if I'm a betting man, there won't be a lot of difference in terms of how the players view it and their execution of the defense that Barry Odom expects them to have.
For a defensive guy like yourself, the A&M Arkansas game's got to be a lot of fun for you. You've got Barry Odom on the Arkansas side, and then you got a guy at Texas A&M named Mike Elko, who's pretty darn good at his job. He's one of the craftier guys in this league.
Yeah, he is. I've always been very impressed with Mike, and the A&M defense has probably not been as consistent as he would like them to be. Against Alabama, I know that he was pulling his hair out with a lot of the explosive pass plays, but look, Alabama does that to everybody. But he's really, really one of the best out there as far as scheme, as far as game planning, as far as getting his guys in the right positions. He's one of the best, and again, when you look at what Kendall Briles is going to have to look at with that A&M defense, he's got his work cut out for him as well. And like always, guys, you know better than anybody, that game, for some reason, always comes down to the wire and is always a crazy one. But that's what makes the league great, and that's what makes games in this league that you can look forward to every year great as well.
And, Coach, let's bounce around the league a little bit here. What have you observed is going wrong with LSU right now?
Well, I mean, you'd have to look at the defensive side of the ball, guys. There's no question in my mind that, the off week probably a lot of people that have worked with him. He had 9 years in the NFL. But sometimes you got to figure out what you can do with the players. We talked earlier about the genius, no matter how smart you are as a coordinator or a position coach, that your guys are able to execute what you give them. And that just hasn't happened for LSU so far. So I think this week off, they've got players at LSU, and I think the week off is going to really pay dividends for those guys in terms of Bo now knowing what they need to do, giving him, kind of a better sense of what the players are able, to digest, and letting them play play like the athletic guys that they are, because he's going to need some buy-in with these guys, and it's going to need to happen pretty quickly.
Coach, you had a unique experience in that you went from a coordinator to a head coach, and then you worked as a coordinator for Larry Fedora over at North Carolina. For a guy like Barry Odom, what experience or what intangible sort of coaching things can he take from being a head coach and into his teaching of this Arkansas defense?
Well, I know for me, and I'm sure Barry's the same way, when you've been in that seat, as long as we were, and then you went back to being a coordinator, I think the cool perspective for me and for him is that we know sitting back in that seat exactly what Sam Pittman and Larry Fedora needed from us. And until you sit in that seat, you think you know, but you don't quite entirely know. And that's why you asked if Barry Odom can be a great sounding board for Sam. Absolutely he can. But more importantly, he knows basically he's the head coach of the defense. And I know for me personally, I took a lot of pride in myself for Larry Fedora never to have to worry about what we were doing on defense. I never wanted him to worry one bit of half of the team. And that was whether it was a discipline issue, what was going on the field, or recruiting. And I feel like Barry has the same experience because let me tell you what, as a head coach, sitting in that seat, getting peppered with questions and people pulling at you every single day, the best thing that you want and the most important thing you want from every assistant is to do your job and make my job easier. And I know Barry knows that. I know he's doing a great job for Sam. And I know Sam's very appreciative of that as well.
So I ask you to put your headset on again for a game plan. Now, obviously, Arkansas plays a lot of zone. You talked about, it's scheme at this point. They play a lot of zone. Jimbo knows that. So what kind of change-ups can we expect Barry Odom to throw at Jimbo Fisher just to give him different looks early in the game?
Well, I think maybe, different pressures. Maybe, again, we talked about where the fourth or fifth rusher is coming from. Maybe dialing up a new pressure here and there. Maybe disguising the coverage and jumping into a different type of, 2-deep coverage or 3-deep coverage that he hasn't seen. And then jumping into some things where, you have the ability to really take the air out of those zones or don't give those areas of the field where the quarterback, is expecting to have windows of 7 to 8 yards where he's got to put a ball in that window before a defender can get to it. Maybe mix in a little bit of what we call man or match coverage where those windows disappear, but it looks like zone on the snap. Things like that where, again, the picture changes for the quarterback, when the ball is snapped. And, again, in the run game, it definitely affects the run game because how the offensive line has to target who they block on run. And that matters because if the picture changes post-snap for those offensive linemen and A&M's got a really potent run game, they're getting better every week, then things change for the offensive line on the run in terms of who has who and what lineman is targeting what defensive lineman up to what linebacker. And when those things change on the move, that creates issues for the offense. So I think you could probably, if you're going to look at some changes or potential changes, I think things like that early in the game could be something that you'd look for.
Is disguising coverage job one pre-snap for a defense? Is making sure the quarterback's not comfortable with the coverage he sees?
100% of the time. That's the number one job of the defense. But I say that with an asterisk. It's the number one job of the defense as long as you're not tricking and disguising yourself. And that's what we see a lot, right? Guys get out of position because they try to hold disguises too long, or they've got too much width on the disguise, or they're too tight on the disguise, or they don't have the right cushion on the disguises. Things of that nature can get you in trouble when you disguise. So there's a means to the madness when you disguise, and that is, look, we'll never sacrifice alignment or assignment for disguise, but disguise is always the number one element that's necessary for a defense and the effectiveness because it jacks with the quarterback pre- and post-snap.
All right, good stuff. Gene Chizik, SEC Network football analyst with us here. Coach, we really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
Guys, absolutely. Have a great afternoon.
All right, Gene Chizik with us here on Ruskin and Zach.